continue in, I'm going to talk a little bit about what it takes to sustain the efforts that you all have been doing in PBIS for all of this time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share some factors, I'm going to share results for some studies, and I'm hopefully going to give you a few ideas of what to do throughout. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to raise your hand if you feel like you have a deep understanding of the concept of sustainability. We got half a hand up over here. I disagree with you. How many people have a bad habit? Okay. How many people have a good habit? Then you all know a lot more about sustainability than you think, okay? Sustainability seems like this weird, scary, big term, but all it is people continuing to do things that work over time. So we all have experiences with it. The same things we know about behavior support with individuals also work with organizations as well. So what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to provide you kind of a nerdy definition of sustainability and then kind of walk through the little parts of it. Because I come from higher ed, we always have to complicate things with really big, nerdy words. But hopefully this one isn't too bad. Durable implementation of a practice at a level of fidelity of implementation that continues to produce valued outcomes. Okay, so I'm going to pull that apart. I'm going to pull out two things that are really important. Fidelity of implementation is going to be the first one I'm going to talk about. Okay. How many people feel like they have a good understanding of fidelity of implementation in the room? Okay, a few of you. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to describe to you something that I think is going to connect fairly well. Okay, how many people have flown on an airplane lately? Okay, a few of you. So when most people get on an airplane, you go in, you're thinking about your seat, you look over, and a lot of times you're looking to see, like, is there any room left in the overhead bins for your bag, or are you going to have to check it? I always, instead of looking right, I always look left. And I look left inside the cockpit. And I'm looking for something very particular. Here is a co-pilot. She has, if you haven't ever looked inside and gotten freaked out, look at all of these levers, all of these knobs, all of these dials, all of these flashing lights. Here's something you really need to know about flying an airplane. This one has never worked. This one's not plugged into anything. This one works but doesn't give you any important information. This one, if it moves over here, we're all going to die, okay? So it's really, really complicated. There are a lot of things going on, but there are only a few things that you absolutely have to pay attention to. So what is she doing right now? She is going through her pre-flight checklist. She is checking off to make sure that all of the most important things for flying the plane are all in line, okay? She's doing that to make sure that we have a safe flight, that all the people on the airplane are going to survive, which is a bit of a plus. Maybe that we'd even have a bit of a pleasant ride, right? When she doesn't pay attention to that sheet, things can go wrong. I don't know if you saw this, but about a month and a half ago, there was a flight in India where it had to turn around because people were experiencing bleeding from their noses and bleeding from their ears. Okay? It was all due to cabin pressurization. They had not pressurized the cabin. And what the pilots had done is they'd done something actually a little bit creative. They'd kept the cabin pressurization off for a little bit because there was some low pressure weather. And so that's something that's a trick that sometimes people do, and they get a little creative with flying. So here's the actual checklist. Here's the one right here. Turn on engine bleeds. When you turn on the engine bleeds, cabin pressure pressurizes to the flight. No more bleeding out of your ears, no more bleeding out of your nose. That's a good thing, right? We really want people to go through those checklists, and when they don't, bad things happen, okay? So Here is another picture. Here is a picture of a school team meeting. It's a school PBIS team. And they are using the same kind of checklist. They are using, right here, a fidelity of implementation tool called the Tiered Fidelity Inventory. It is a checklist of all of the most important things to keep schools and classrooms safe, predictable, and positive. I am going to argue to you that what they are doing here on the right is more complex than flying a plane. There's a lot more going on. There are a lot more people. There's a lot of scheduling. There's a lot of issues going on. And so they need to pay attention to the critical features that make the school work. And that's what they're doing right now, working as a team. So that's fidelity of implementation. The extent to which the critical features of PBIS are implemented as intended. Why do we do that? Well, there's two really good reasons. Number one is if we've picked a really good evidence-based practice, then we are more likely to see improved outcomes when we implement more of it. The other thing it does is it helps tell us what's our next step toward full implementation. So it does those two things for us. And sustainability is totally dependent on fidelity of implementation and assessing it regularly. All right, what about that next one, valued outcomes? So here's the thing that I came to PBIS a little bit later in life, and the thing that I've really appreciated is that nobody tells you in PBIS what your valued outcomes are supposed to be. If there's something important to you for the healthy social and emotional development of students, you identify what that is, and then you put the practices in place to get there. And the framework is flexible enough that it doesn't tell you that this is only used to reduce problem behavior in the hallways. It's used to address the outcomes that you care about the most. All right, so I've given you a little bit of basic info, share with you a little information on what the odds a given school initiative will sustain. It's not a study, it's just a picture. This says the journey of 1,000 miles sometimes ends very, very badly. And if you haven't figured it out yet, your school initiative is not this guy on the left. It is this fish over here, designed perfectly to swim upstream against the odds with precision and then, boom, getting chomped in an instant. So let's take a look at some of those bears. You might be thinking of them. I'm going to read this one out to you, see if it sounds familiar. Memo to school administrators from district administrators. In keeping with the new state initiative this fall, we'll be implementing an exciting new district initiative of SNI, shiny new initiative, in place of LYI, which is, it's all, it's too bad that you can get that because that means you've experienced something like this. All professional development previously scheduled LYI will now be reassigned to SNI. Release time and materials will be discontinued. You'll need to create new teams, so you might as well disassemble your LYI team so you can have your SNI teams in place. And then we all know the signal of a new initiative. The binders are coming next week. All right, so I always it's nice to get a laugh from this, but then it's also like, oh man, everybody here has experienced something like that. So here's the next picture I'm going to show you, and it is optimistically titled, The Birth and Death Cycles of Educational Innovations. All right, so here's how to read this. Each one of these dotted lines right here is a school year, okay? So this is years across here. The uppy-downy column here, axis, is fidelity of implementation, okay? And then each one of these solid lines is a new initiative, okay? So we get very excited about this. We implement, we get everybody in the district trained. It starts to crest a little bit, and then all of a sudden we're off to the next shiny new initiative, and then boom, This one dies. This one comes up, this one dies, this one comes up, this one dies, up, dies, up, dies. Anybody experience this? A few of you have seen this around. Okay, so here's the thing that's really disturbing. Well, there's sort of two things that are kind of disturbing about it. Number one is this picture here is 30 years old. This has been the status quo for education since our modern form of education has existed. And it's interesting because we educators are optimistic, right? We're excited about the next, newest, biggest thing that's going to come down the line and get everybody sitting in their seats and paying attention and performing at grade level expectations. But the thing that's really interesting is there are a lot of people, publishers, curriculum developers, and so on, that are getting really, really rich off of our optimism. And that's not cool. But we also have some other things that are success stories. So here is actually the last 18 years of implementation of school-wide PBIS, or positive behavioral interventions and supports. These are years across the bottom. This is as of this last summer, 2018. 26,424 schools, about 28% of the schools in the country doing this. And the thing that's kind of neat, too, is it's not just in the US, but in about 20 countries around the world, too, that are doing this, which is kind of fun. So what is it about it that makes it work? Well, one of the things is that it's a framework that can be extended to a lot of different things. So one of my friends and one of the pioneers of PBIS, Jeff Colvin, wrote a training manual for some very particular people. This book is called The Successful Bartender. Anybody here been a bartender before? So what kind of training do you get to be a bartender? You get quizzed on what kinds of drinks you have to make, and you get to learn a lot of different drinks. And then number two, you learn that you're not supposed to give drinks to young people. Do you get any training on barroom management? Nope. No required training. Hey, sounds like education. That's great. So what Jeff did is he said, you know what? We could actually build a 3-tiered model for bartending. And he's got, instead of a triangle, he has a pint glass. Right? And he actually has visuals of tier 1. This is tier 1 behavior. Here's tier 2. And here's tier 3 behavior. All going on, yeah. One of the biggest indicators of tier 3 behavior is that there is a neon Raiders logo in the bar. You already know that there's something going on there. I know I've insulted a lot of you, or at least will be insulting a lot of you soon. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to share with you some of the lessons learned for implementing and sustaining PBIS, and give you a few examples throughout that will go on. It's all based on research. And I'm going to share with you four key principles. Number one is priority. Number two is effectiveness. Number three is efficiency. And number four is continuous regeneration. So I'm just going to talk about each one of these in turn as we go through. So let's talk about priority. Well, a lot of people think about priority as, whether it's important or not. Well, guess what? In education, everything's important. I'll make a little bit of a confession to you all. I am what is known in the desk organization world as a stacker. Is anybody else here a stacker? Okay, so there are a lot of there. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for sharing. It makes me feel like I'm at home here. So if you're a stacker, what you know is you got your desk, and then you got piles of each one of your other little initiatives that you have. And then what happens when you have too many piles? You create a new pile, and then when you create more piles, you start actually having very little usable desk space, right? So you say, no, I need to have usable desk space because I got to do my day-to-day every little thing. So what you do, you take a stack and you put it on top of another stack. And there's an implicit acknowledgement that you will never see those papers ever again, okay? And so that thing, which might very well be a thing that you have learned today that you want to take back to your classrooms on Monday, might disappear forever. It might be gone. So priority is importance, but it's importance in comparison to all of the other things that we have to do. And we have to do a lot in education. And I'm going to tell you something that I think is really, really important when we talk about priority. There are too many good ideas in education for us to do them all. We actually have to give ourselves permission to let go of many of the good things so that we have time to implement the few great things. And that's really, really, really key. And that can be hard to do. But let's talk about priority in terms of how well it's incorporated into our daily practice, how it's related to other initiatives that are out there, and then think about what we do to promote it. So one of the things that's really key for us to do is if you've got a really good idea that's working for you, don't keep it a secret. Shout it from the rooftops. This is something that we are doing that is working in education. And share that information out. So for those of you who are implementing PBIS and it's working really well and you really like it, have you presented to your community groups? Have you presented to your school board about it? Have you presented to your parent-teacher associations about it? Have you shared out with people who might be able to help you? So that's one way to do it. Another way is to get it built right into your written policy. So for those of you at the district level, that's going to be a really, really key thing. Can you actually see the great ideas built in to policies about what you promote, about job descriptions, about hiring criteria, and so on? And then the other thing you can do is you can do something called braiding, where you show how this initiative that you have is connected to other initiatives that are really important as well. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an example of that. This is sort of like my desk, right? Here are all of the different stacks. And the challenge becomes if I view each of these as a separate initiative with separate teams, separate data, separate meetings, separate everything, I'm going to knock a bunch of those stacks off of my desk and not get to them. But if you've got a framework for implementing each of these, sometimes with what you're doing and sometimes with a little tweak of what you're doing, it makes it much easier to meet all of those goals. So let me give you a little bit of an example of this. How many people here have heard of ACEs? Okay, adverse childhood experiences. A few of you out there. Okay, they've gotten a lot of press these days and for a lot of really good reason. Okay, so very simply, ACEs are a count of the number of really bad things that happen to you, that happen to people as children. Okay, and there are a few different categories: abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. And essentially an ACEs, if you hear about somebody talking about an ACEs score, that's simply counting up the number of adverse childhood experiences that you have, events you have experienced. I got my E's mixed up there for a moment. Okay, my daughter also thinks crocodile attacks would also be adverse childhood experiences, so she wanted to make sure that I put crocodile attacks up there too. So all of those things and crocodile attacks, bad, okay? That'll come up later too. So here's something really interesting about the ACEs work. So there was a study, very large study, 17,000 participants over the hills in California, asking people about how many ACEs they'd experienced. And this was eye-opening for me and for many other people. What it says is about a third had not experienced any ACEs, but about 2/3 had experienced one or more, and a good number of people had experienced a lot. Okay? This is a concern because I think I hadn't thought about how many traumatic experiences our students have faced. So here's something that's really, really important to know. These 17,000 participants, almost all of them upper middle class, white, college-educated people. So what does that tell you about what you might guess about how many ACEs many of your students have experienced or are experiencing or are about to experience? Yeah. And we really want to worry about that because there are so many really bad outcomes that come from more ACEs that you experience. It's this compounding increase in risk. But the thing that's really interesting, so I think of two things from this. Number one is there are a lot of kids experiencing a lot of traumatic events. But here's something interesting that the science is telling us. Just because you have experienced a traumatic event does not necessarily mean that you will be traumatized. Some people can shake it off, some people can't. At some times it works, at some times it doesn't. And we don't have the science yet to figure out what's the difference there. So now think about this as a thing. Widespread population-level traumatic experiences, we need to support them, but we don't know who to support. Okay? So here's some things that we could do. Because we really care about trauma, we ought to do something about some trauma-informed care in schools. And here's the most common way that people do it. They add one more training that people have to go to, one more program, and it becomes one more stack on the desk that disappears. Even if you train everybody in your district, how many people are still going to be in your district next year? Did you actually have a plan for retraining? Do you have a plan for attrition and so on? So here might be something that could work better. What if we had an initiative that we were using to do what we know is most important for children experiencing trauma? Make classrooms safe, positive, and predictable, and provide a little bit of training to people to figure out where are the warning signs for who needs a little bit more support. How do we figure that out, and how do we get them referred for the more support? Does that sound like anything that you're all doing right now? Does it sound like something that you could address through PBIS? Sure. All right. All we need sometimes is just provide a little bit of structure and things can work out. Okay. So here's some of the steps in braiding initiatives. Number one is we identified what are our shared valued outcomes that we all care about. It might be making students resilient in the face of trauma. It might be increasing graduation rates. It might be decreasing the graduation rate equity gap. There are all sorts of things that you might think about that you can fit under a flexible framework. Then we stop doing some of the good things so that we can do those few great things. And we start figuring out where are the places where we can integrate our systems instead of having these siloed projects where we're working against each other instead. All right. So here's some other ways that we can address priority. We can share it out more broadly, as I was describing. I'm going to give you a little bit of an example. School newsletters. How many people have a PBIS newsletter? Okay. How many people have a school newsletter that's not necessarily a PBIS newsletter? How many people think, maybe it would be useful for us to put PBIS stuff in our school newsletter to inform parents about what we're doing with their children while they're with us in our care? That sounds good. So here is one of my favorite newsletters that I have seen. And it's an oldie but a goodie. So one thing that's really great is they've got their school expectations right up here. They also have a description of what are the things that they are working on in school right now. They've got a little thing that you can cut out and have a conversation with your kid about something related to PBIS or social emotional development that you're doing. So I have an 8-year-old and a 7-year-old at home. My 7-year-old, he is very advanced. So when he comes home from school, I ask him what he did that day, and he says, nothing. And I thought, oh, this is great. I was thinking that you would do that as a teenager, but you're so advanced. But that doesn't really give me a whole lot to do. But I get, okay, I'm going to make another confession. So both of my students' teachers have classroom blogs, and I have never gone to them, okay? But my 7-year-old's teacher sends a text home every week that just says, this week we are working on these 2 things, and one is a behavioral goal, and one is an academic goal. And what it says is talk to your kid around the dinner table or whenever about identifying as many things around that begin with the letter A. That was in kindergarten, so there's that. But also, today, this week, we are talking about respect, and especially in the hallways. Please ask your child about how they can show respect in the hallways, or why is it important to be safe on the playground. Instant conversation, and I'm reinforcing the lessons that are taught in school. Here's another thing that you can do. Take a look here. School expectations, parent pickup. They had some challenges with their data on stuff that was happening with parent pickup. So why not actually provide some instruction in how we want to do it? Boom, right there. So there's some good ways to reach out to families. There are some not so good ways. Here is my footloose example. This was a friend of mine's son. This was written on the back of his prom ticket. Pardon that. This is the back of this. So they're like, we're communicating to families and children about what's needed. If you haven't figured out, there are some problems with this approach. Of course, lots of no's. There's lots of things that I have not heard of that now I'm going to look up online to figure out what they are. Probably the thing that I worry about the most is no freaking and then no excessive grinding, which means you have to teach the discrimination between appropriate grinding and excessive grinding. Allow me not to be part of that lesson, please. There are some things that you cannot forget. But it also has a built-in family home communication element. If you break a rule, you will call your parents before leaving. Okay, so don't do that. But there's lots of ways to reach out and do things a little bit better, increase priority. So now I'm going to talk about effectiveness. Effectiveness is whether it works. But there are a couple little parts about effectiveness that are really, really important. And I'm going to come back to this one. Effects must be attributed to the practice. I have to know that it's what I'm doing that's making a difference. So I'm going to talk about that whole thing. Remember, my daughter was talking about crocodile attacks. That's because we were in Australia last year. So we went to a conference in Australia, and we had the genius idea of renting an RV and driving up and down the east coast of Australia in a really big RV. Now, I am a really good driver. I am super safe. I am not worried about the snow outside. I feel really, really solid about my driving. Okay? I'm a good driver. That's part of my core. Like, that's one of the things that I think like I'm actually good at. So what do you know about driving in Australia? Other side of the road. Exactly. So when I went to the checkout stand, when I went to go rent my RV, they gave me something. They gave me a wristband. And I put it on. It says, Aussie roads, drive left. Now, before you freak out and say, no way you are a good driver, I was stopped waiting for a ferry. I was not taking a picture. But I will tell you something. If you have done it before, you know that it is actually really hard to drive on the other side of the road. It's really hard. Okay? My kids, who are sitting in the back, are keeping a running total of how many times I spray the windshield instead of use my turn signal. Turns out it was a lot, right? But I'm going to tell you something. Here was a little intervention they used to connect my good driving to be able to drive well in a different environment. I was not a bad driver, but I was used to driving a particular way. Okay, think about this for a moment. Do you maybe have students in your school who are really good behaviors, but have some different rules at school than they're used to at home and in their neighborhood? Yeah. And so what does it mean when we say they're really bad drivers or they're really bad behaviors? So I want you to think about this. What is going to be your drive left intervention? Just to remind you about the little change that'll make things go well. Okay? Here is a drive left intervention. This guy right here is teaching a hallway behavior lesson with his lesson plan. There's his drive left intervention. Here's the thing that helps remind him. We're going to do a booster lesson because everything gets a little wild in January. Boom. Right? Here's her drive left intervention. Here's this team's drive left intervention. But guess what? This team and using a team is also a drive left intervention. It protects against losing a few people who are running the show from derailing your entire process. Okay? Here's another drive left intervention. What does this thing do? Right? Here's a school-wide acknowledgement ticket system. Does it work because it gives kid a 1 in 100 chance of winning a smelly eraser on Friday? No. It works because of the positive conversation we have with a child about her or his behavior. And the tickets are just a reminder, a drive left intervention for us to increase our rates of acknowledgement for students for that. So, this little ticket system over here, I was talking with a coach a few years back, and he said, you know, I'm the new team facilitator at my school. They had internal coaches. He said, I love everything about positive behavior support, but I don't like the tickets. I was taught in my teacher training program that if I gave kids rewards for doing things the right way, I would crush their intrinsic motivation and they would grow up to become evil superheroes, right? Or supervillains, I guess. That would be something I would really, really be concerned about. We've got lots of evidence showing that there are plenty of ways to do it right, and there are a couple of ways to do it wrong. But this reminder says, we got to do this. So here's one of the things that we did. We said in this school, they actually tallied up all of their positive tickets, and they tallied up all their office referrals. And I said, you know what? We could graph that, and we could actually graph it on the same chart. Here's what it is. This blue bar is office discipline referrals per year, total office referrals. This orange line is number of positive tickets given out. As soon as we put that together, he looked at it and said, oh my God, I'm sold. What we are doing is making a difference in kids' behavior. I am making a difference by this. And he became the #1 proponent of using the acknowledgement system in schools, just because he saw it working that way. All right. So here's some things that we can do to ensure effectiveness. #1 is we focus on our fidelity of implementation tools. We assess it regularly. When we have a skinny triangle like this, we widen it out. We widen our base. We start spreading it out to the buses. We start spreading it out to the community areas. We start spreading it out to the McDonald's that's across the street from the middle school. We can do all of that. And we can also build up, add tiers 2 and 3 as well. All right. So lots of measures to assess fidelity. Please check in with your district teams on that one. Now, efficiency. Efficiency is a little funky because efficiency is just this sort of cost benefit. Is it worth doing the effort that we put into it? And here's the thing that's really important to know about efficiency. I don't have a whole lot to talk about efficiency right now. I do want to make sure I get through some of this content. But one of the things that's really important is you know that spark when you are doing that shiny new initiative in your school? And it's just new and exciting, and we're doing things a different way, and we're all kind of on the same page and motivated to do it. If you haven't figured it out, that spark will fade out a little bit over time. And if you're doing what works, then it's going to keep working, and that's great. But it's not going to be as exciting. So I was working with a coach, and she said, one of the things that I figured out when I first started implementing PBIS, I thought it was like building a shelf. First, I build tier 1, and then I build tier 2, and then I build tier 3, and it's done. She said, doing PBIS is nothing like building a shelf. Doing PBIS is like doing the laundry. It's not that glamorous, but you gotta keep doing it over and over and over again, or else you'll run out of clothes. Or else you open up your bag and you're like, oh, I didn't notice that stain there, right? There it is, boom, okay? So take that spark that you have of excitement and build it into getting everything down on paper. Get those lessons. When you build a lesson plan, write it out, get it electronic, share it with everybody so that everybody's got it and that it's so easy to do when the spark drops a little bit and it feels a little bit more like doing the laundry. Okay, and the last one. I saved the nerdiest one for last, continuous regeneration. Continuous regeneration sounds like a weird, scary thing, but we all have some experience with it. How many people here are married? How many people here have been married for more than 7 years? Okay. Is your marriage at 7+ years the same as it was at 1 year or -1 years? No, it's not. It's changed over time, right? You've adapted it to keep the marriage going. I should have asked how many of you are happily married, and then we'd figure that part out. Okay, next time. Good, thank you for that brave acknowledgement over there. But you change little things over time to make sure that that thing called the marriage keeps going along, right? Same idea. How many people have heard of Madonna? Right? Okay, good. I'm in the right room. I asked my students about that, and they said, Madonna, isn't that Lady Gaga's mom? And I'm like, oh, I'm so old. Okay. Anyhow, so what continuous regeneration is it's changing little parts of what you're doing to keep it fresh, to keep it relevant, to keep it working, to keep it interesting, but to keep it effective. Right? So we use data to do that. We adjust based on increasing priority. Sometimes that means we're showing how we can use PBIS to address this new district initiative or state initiative. We improve effectiveness by seeing how it's working and what parts are not working and improve that. We improve efficiency by saying, how could we make this easier? What if we used electronic meeting minutes that are posted on our Google Drive or whatever district system you have so that it's just there and nobody has to type them up afterwards and send them out to everybody? And connect with a community of practice. Lots of places you can steal stuff from other people. And I'm going to encourage you, as a co-director of the National Center, to steal stuff from people on a regular basis. But I'm also going to ask you that when somebody posts something online and you take it and you tweak it, that you share it back so that people see what you did to change it for your environment. Share that forward. Okay? Lots of great websites to steal stuff from. All sorts. And I'm going to show you a little example of continuous regeneration. So here's a school. This is a school in Vancouver, Washington. Okay, did not hear whoop whoop on that one. Okay. Oh well. So here's one of the things that they found. They were looking at their office discipline referrals. They were looking at their office discipline referrals at the end of October. And they found lots of referrals on the playground and also some in the classroom. Okay, so let me ask you this question. Where do the vast majority of referrals come from in schools in the US? Office discipline referrals. Just shout it out. Here's the thing. Whatever you just answered, you're probably right because you're looking at your data. But overall across the country, the #1 place where office referrals come from is the classroom. Now, it might not be true for your school, and if it is not true for your school, then that is a very good sign to pay attention to teaching and reteaching and changing the environment in that particular area. We're going to see more referrals in the classroom because, A, there's somebody at the front of the room looking at people doing stuff. Sometimes we ask kids to do things that they don't like to do, so on. Okay. So this school said that actually the school counselor at this school said, let's look at our data. We need to do something on the playground because it shouldn't be our #1 place of referrals. So what he did is he created the playground challenge. And we all know in elementary school that all you need to do is give something a cool name and then all of a sudden it's automatically better. So, playground challenge. So here's what he did. He said, all right, school, for every recess period that you have where you do not have a referral for your grade level, office discipline referral, you get a link in the chain. Okay? And when your chain reaches the floor, your grade gets an extra recess. Okay? Is that a tangible reward system? It is. Is it pretty close to a natural one, meaning if we do our work well and don't interfere with other people, we actually have more time to do the stuff that we like to do? Yeah, it's a little closer to natural. So here's the thing that's interesting. He also told me, he said, you know, one of the things I figured out is I could actually adjust the length of the chain depending on whether I needed to encourage some of them a little bit more than others around here. Somebody asked him, said, you know what? In my school, the kids would just come and trash it. Somebody would just destroy it. And he said, no. Here's what happened in our school without any adult intervention. They assigned a kid to stand at each side of the bulletin board so that nobody messed with it. So let me ask you this question. Where do you think this was posted? Close. This is in the Northwest. All right, I'll give you credit for that. I'll give you credit for that. This is the hallway leading out to the playground, which means this is where kids are lining up to go in or go out. So they just naturally created conversations about, oh my gosh, we're close. We got to make sure to go really well. Let's really make sure not to run up the slide today. You know, stuff like that. Have a conversation about positive behavior and how they're going to encourage each other. So they did it, and what do you think happened? Yeah, well, referrals on the playground went down, but guess what? Referrals in the classroom went down almost as much. Why do you think that was? Shout it out. That's a good question about data. Exactly. So the teachers in the school said, you know what? When students come in from recess, when students come in from lunch recess, they're coming in happy. They're coming in ready to learn. I'm not doing problem solving with them. We just rock and roll right into the work. Cool. But here's some things that we got to watch out for. When we do continuous regeneration, there are two parts of any intervention. There's the core part in the middle that works. And then there's the part around it that is the window dressing, the fluff that doesn't make any difference. It is irrelevant. So when you do the changes to keep it fresh, the idea is change the window dressing that's irrelevant, but keep the core intact. Here's the thing. There is something called a lethal mutation. And a lethal mutation is when you tweak things, but you actually change the part that worked into something that doesn't work. That's not good. So you got to know what makes it work. I was describing to you before about those ticket systems and what parts of them work and how we can get into a lot of trouble if we're just tossing them out there like confetti without actually having the conversation with the child about the behavior. That's the core in the middle. Okay? I was working with a coach. I was visiting a school. And we were visiting in a classroom. We had gone and done a SET, school-wide evaluation tool, chatting with a teacher who was a friend of the coaches, and we were sitting there, and she said, you know, I got this, I'm really worried about one of my kids. She's crying a lot in class, but, you know, I haven't been able to get her to talk with me about it. It's obvious she's really shy. I have not been able to contact the parent. Parent doesn't really say that there's anything going on. And so she said, well, what I've been trying to do is I've been trying to give her lots of positive tickets. And then what I do every Friday when I go in to pull one out for the prize bowl, look in there, can't ever find her name. So she said, I did something really smart. What I did was I created the same ticket, but I just did it in multicolors, and it looked like it was random. You could tell this was October because she still had funds left for the copier. And so she said, and it looked random, but I always gave her the yellow ticket. And then when I went in to reach on Friday, I would look for the yellow ticket. What do you think she found? No yellow ticket. She said, what's going on? She said, well, I'm going to go, the coach who I was working with, Kathy, she said, I'm going to go look at her in her desk. Opens up her desk, looks inside. There's a stack of all of her tickets. She's been hoarding tickets. So she puts it down, we start walking out, and then boom. I mean, if it was a few seconds before, it would have been bad. We're standing at the door. She comes in the middle of recess crying, sits down at her desk, pulls up her stack of tickets, and goes through them one by one by one. Would that have worked if she did not know what she had done to earn those tickets? No, it would not. She found something that was way more valuable to her than putting it in for a drawing or taking it home. She was using it as a routine to remind her that she could do good. Kind of cool. Wouldn't have worked otherwise. Let me share with you one more lethal mutation before I get the hook here. Clip chart, behavior pocket chart. Hey, it looks like positive behavior support. Because it's green, it's yellow, it's red. It has to do with behavior. Let me be really, 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 really clear with you. Clip charts are not a PBIS practice. Okay? And let me tell you why. Praise can be public, but corrections should always be private. And this is a public correction device. Even if you've got the blue and the sparkles and this student could do better and better and better, none of us wants to be pointed out in front of the entire class or in front of this entire room about one mistake that we made. So there's lots of ways that we can go in a direction other than this. And if you're still thinking, you know, I don't know, but but I'm really positive with the kids and my clip chart works okay, I would say try this out. Ask the students in your class, hey, who are the kids who are always on yellow and red at the end of the day? They will tell you who they are. And where I come from in Oregon, those kids are almost always the black and brown kids. And the poor kids, and the kids who are coming in experiencing a lot of trauma, and the kids with disabilities. Okay, so please don't do that. Instead, there's lots of other positive approaches that you can use. When I see a student doing something I don't want, I look for, this is called the praise around approach, the closest person who's doing what it is that I want them to do, and I acknowledge them publicly for it. And you would be surprised how well this works. Not just in elementary school, but in middle school and high school. I can also give a nonverbal signal to a student, so when they're just doing something a little bit off, I might just walk over and tap over here, and then move on. And if I need to step in and have a little conversation with a student, I do that as quietly as possible, so as not to provide extra attention for that, and an interrupt instruction. Right? Or use interdependent group reward systems. So I'll give you a little example here. I also got the chance to go to the Netherlands a couple years ago. People in the Netherlands say, we love PBIS, but we do not believe in individual rewards. That is against our culture as Europeans. Said, okay, there's nothing wrong with that. So what they did is they said, we've got a system that works a little bit better. Every time that somebody does something well, we give them this little Lego type thing, and they walk over, and they get to put it in this box for the school. And when that fills up, they get to have time to create things with them, right? So you get that little acknowledgement for doing things right, and it's how you're helping the whole group. The intermediate teacher said, I don't know if our students are really going to go for this. But they said, okay, we'll build something that's even more complicated. What they did is they built these treasure maps, and when students did things right, they got closer to a clue toward a buried treasure that somebody had gone out and buried on their end of school trip, end of the year trip. And the last thing that they earned were the geocache coordinates for going and digging it up. They were way into that, right? Nice STEM activity. Very, very cool. So there's lots of great stuff we can do. And I think I'm going to end on that. I thank you very much for your time, and continue to do the really, really good work that you are doing. It's all really wonderful, and I'll be happy to chat with you afterwards if you have any questions. Thank you very much. Thank you.